Hello everyone. The topic of today's presentation is consciousness in the context of the entire universe. The subject is not easy, but I will try to present it in a way that is easy to follow and easy to understand. Let's first try to define what is consciousness, so we know what we're talking about. Consciousness is a system of processing information. By processing, we mean here creating, sorting, interpreting, understanding, encoding, storing, searching, translating, sending, receiving, implementing, and using information. Information comes to us from our senses and perception, what we see, what we hear, touch, smell, but not only. We can also create information using our imagination, feelings, or our understanding. What is the difference between consciousness and a computer, which is also an information processing system? Consciousness is an information processing system that is aware of itself. There are no computers that are aware of themselves. The computer does not care whether it is turned on or off. To a computer, it does not matter if it is used by an artist or by a criminal. It is quite difficult to disagree with this definition of consciousness. Now let's consider the role of information in biology. It turns out that the reliable transmission of information from generation to generation is essential for reproduction of living organisms. From a carrot seed, we cannot grow a pine tree or any other plant. Only a carrot can grow from a carrot seed. When ants reproduce, they don't breed elephants. Passing information from generation to generation is also the essence of evolution. New generations of living organisms implement what previous generations have learned. Summarizing, reliable passing of information from generation to generation is firstly necessary for reproduction of living organisms and is also the essence of evolution. What is necessary for information to exist in the first place? The necessary condition for the existence of information is encoding. In other words, information cannot exist without encoding. When we speak, we encode our thoughts in words and sentences of the English language. Encoding involves the so-called carrier of information. Our thought, encoded in a sentence, can be carried as a sound wave, can be written on paper, or can be stored in a computer memory. What I'm saying now is encoded in words and sentences of the English language. My vocal organs encode these sentences into sound waves. The sound waves reach the microphone, which encodes them into a variable electrical signal. This electrical signal is then digitized and encoded as a digital data stream. The digital data stream is then transmitted using a digital communication network that we call the Internet. Your browser decodes the received digital data stream and recreates the electrical signal. The electrical signal, after amplification, moves the speaker's membrane. The speaker membrane reproduces the sound waves produced by my vocal organs. Sound waves from the speaker reach your ears and you hear them. Your consciousness decodes the information contained in the sound waves because you know the code. you know the English language. In this way, what I say reaches you and you can understand what I'm trying to explain. Notice that encoding takes place at every stage of the existence, transmission, and processing of information. If we don't know the code, the information is not accessible to us, but it doesn't mean that the information doesn't exist. Encoding of information cannot be random because randomly encoded information is not retrievable. In a process that we call life, information encoding is highly reliable and enables information to be passed from generation to generation. What we just said leads to quite a surprising conclusion. Encoding of information had to exist before any living organism could reproduce and before any evolution could even begin, simply because transmission of information from generation to generation is essential for both reproduction and evolution of living organisms. Now we can solve the famous puzzle. What was first, chicken or egg? If you don't know this puzzle, it goes like this. What was first, chicken or egg? Chicken. Chicken? Where did chicken come from? From an egg. Egg? Where did the egg come from? Chicken laid it. Chicken? Where did chicken come from? This circular set of questions seemingly does not have any answer. But from our discussion so far, the logical answer to this puzzle is that the first was the system of encoding information. Hence, before life appeared in a universe, there had to exist a reliable system of encoding information. From our brief discussion so far, it seems obvious that the existence of life and consciousness should be considered in the context of the entire universe. Restricting the context in any way can only lead to misleading conclusions. It is quite difficult to challenge any step in my reasoning, and yet the result of my reasoning is quite surprising. We should consider the entire universe simply because we are alive. This means that whatever we do or whatever we think about, we should have in mind the entire universe. Are you ready? Are you ready to extend your perspective and the way of thinking to the scale of the entire universe? Do you know anyone who is ready? Now we need to find out where in the universe information processing takes place. Scientists on Earth today are acutely aware of the phenomenal capacity of quantum information processing. For this reason, they try in a great hurry to construct so-called quantum computers. Since quantum information processing is a natural ability of the universe since its very beginning, it is highly likely that the universe itself is already using it. Unfortunately, the fundamental quantum information processing of the universe itself is banned from consideration here on Earth. At the beginning of the 21st century, science on Earth relentlessly promotes the belief that the basis of all quantum processes in a universe is chaos. Belief in chaos and randomness of quantum processes was initiated by some very famous people of the last century who could not imagine an explanation for the seemingly random behavior of elementary particles, such as electrons. As a result of this lack of imagination, the so-called uncertainty principle has been adopted as a foundation of all sciences on Earth. The uncertainty principle, in its essence, brutally averages all traces of the quantum information processing of the universe and can only help to estimate statistical probabilities of some primitive, locally averaged quantum events. The most famous critic of the uncertainty principle as a way to describe the fundamental activity of the universe was Albert Einstein, who famously insisted that God does not play dice. Unfortunately, like all of his contemporaries, Einstein could not imagine and propose a meaningful explanation for seemingly chaotic behavior of elementary particles, such as electrons. In the absence of intelligent critics, the uncertainty principle has acquired the status of a sacred dogma that is not even allowed to be questioned, unless you quickly want to lose your job. Nevertheless, quantum information processing in the universe continues and will continue always and everywhere, no matter how many authorities and how many famous people decide to deny it. Quantum information processing in the universe is regarded as noise and a source of error in today's quantum computers. To reduce this noise, today's quantum computers are cooled down to temperatures close to the absolute zero. I would now like to draw your attention to this year's Nobel Prize in Physics. Nobel Prize in Physics in 2022 was awarded for proving quantum entanglement. 3 researchers, Alain Aspect, John Clauser, and Anton Zeilinger, working independently, experimentally prove the phenomenon of quantum entanglement by studying photons. Quantum entanglement means that elementary particles, such as photons or electrons, for example, can exist in so-called entangled state. Action taken on one of the particles can immediately influence the entire entangled system, predictably changing behavior of entangled particles even if they are far apart. For example, if observer determines the state of one photon or one electron, entangled photons or entangled electrons immediately reflect this state, whether they exist in the same room as the observer or in a galaxy at the opposite end of the universe. This means that everything in a universe could be entangled in the domain of information. In other words, nothing should be considered separate from the entire universe. Some scientists are quite alarmed because it means that so-called local reality does not actually exist. Everything is entangled with the information processing system of the universe. What could be a reason for the entanglement of all elementary particles, such as electrons, in the universe? The entanglement of all elementary particles in the universe could be due to the fact that they all took part in the same event, the Big Bang that started our material universe. It is well known that Einstein ridiculed the existence of quantum entanglement by calling it spooky. But in this particular case, Einstein was wrong. After almost a century of research, quantum entanglement has been confirmed experimentally, and scientists have won the Nobel Prize for confirming it. Let's now come back to the subject of consciousness. where is our consciousness located? Professor Penfield, the famous neurosurgeon, after decades of practice and research in the field of brain surgery, concluded that human consciousness is definitely not in the brain. On the other hand, many people who survived so-called clinical death reported seeing the non-functioning physical bodies along with the exact environment from a distance, while remaining fully conscious and able to move levitating effortlessly, passing through walls to any place they choose. These witness reports imply that in certain conditions, human consciousness can be separated from the physical body to exist and function separately. History gives us more clues. There is a book on earth that begins with a sentence: "Who understands what is said here will not taste death." Do you know anyone who is interested in this subject? Today, this book is called The Gospel of Thomas, and the author of the above sentence is Jesus, who personally demonstrated the immortality of consciousness by returning to life on the third day after his crucifixion. Both the Gospel of Thomas and the Book of Thomas have been removed from religious literature, and all the known copies have been destroyed. But in 1945, a clay jar containing legible copies was found in Egypt. This is the first page of the Gospel of Thomas papyrus with translation of its first sentence. Today, there are many translations of the Gospel of Thomas that, theoretically speaking, should give us a chance to understand the interpretation mentioned in its first sentence. Unfortunately, translators did not quite understand what the Gospel of Thomas is about. They did not understand themselves and did not allow the readers of the translations to understand what the Gospel of Thomas is about. For example, Jesus spoke about cosmos because he was a man from cosmos. See for yourself. I created fire in cosmos. Look, I got it burning. And another page. Whoever has known the cosmos and found a dead body, means matter, is not worthy of the cosmos. The word cosmos is clearly recognizable in Aramaic papyrus. Aramaic alphabet is quite similar to Greek and Cyrillic alphabets. Now, I challenge you, try to find the word cosmos in any gospel. This is why I decided to translate the Gospel of Thomas and the Book of Thomas into two languages, Polish and English, to help interested readers find out what these books are actually about. The Gospel of Thomas in my translation is published in such a way that after opening the book, on the left we have the source text, a papyrus, and on the right we have translation and footnotes. For example, on page 103 you can find a saying, "There is nothing hidden that will not be revealed, and nothing covered that will not be uncovered." This means, among other things, that we can potentially learn anything in the universe, providing that our consciousness is sufficiently evolved not only to connect to the source of the information, but also to understand the information that is available. On page 139 of the Gospel of Thomas, you can find the following statement: "Whoever has known the cosmos and found a dead body, matter, is not worthy of the cosmos." In other words, whoever explored the cosmos and found only dead matter does not deserve to exist in the cosmos. From the point of view of science on Earth in the 21st century, the cosmos contains only matter and energy, with energy being equivalent to matter. Questions what is consciousness and where is consciousness are too difficult for the 21st century science, and scholars avoid them as much as they can. This means that according to the Gospel of Thomas, scientists on Earth in the 21st century are not worthy of the cosmos. That is, they do not deserve to exist. On page 173 of the Gospel of Thomas, we can find another profound statement. Whoever has found himself is worth more than the cosmos. In other words, who has found himself is more precious than the entire cosmos. Try to notice what we are talking about here. One truly conscious person is more valuable than the entire material cosmos. Can you try to find out why? Now let's consider the concept of soul. In virtually all civilizations on Earth, ancient and contemporary, primitive and advanced, exists a concept of soul or spirit. It has been obvious to all these civilizations that soul not only contains our consciousness but can exist completely separately from our physical body. Most likely the common beliefs originated in the reality that people perceived while observing the functioning of their own consciousness. What could be the soul made of? In other words, what is the material carrier of the quantum information processing system in our consciousness? Of all the quantum elementary particles that surround us, the most likely candidates are electrons. The main reason for this is that the so-called free electrons, independent of atoms, exist all around us in huge numbers. These free electrons are attracted to objects that have mass, as a result of a group of phenomena commonly called static electricity. These phenomena give the Earth a negative electrical potential. Electrical potential difference between Earth's surface and the upper edge of the atmosphere is, on average, nearly 500,000 volts. In good weather, the electrical field at ground level is about 100 volts per meter. During storms, the electrical field can be much stronger. This means that we live in electric fields. For example, a tall tree is grounded at the bottom and its crown experiences high voltage. In such a situation, the edges of the leaves glow with an electrophotonic glow. Electrons excited by the electric field emit photons. When the voltage is high enough, you can see this electrophotonic glow with your eyes. These photos of electrophotonic glow around spruce needles were taken in a laboratory with the electrical field set to imitate conditions during storm. Let's now come back to the subject of the soul. Our individual soul, also called an astral body in some traditions and cultures, contains 4 billion trillion electrons, according to the information provided in the Tioba prophecy book. These electrons are quantum entangled or interconnected in the information domain with one another and with all electrons in the universe. This means that our consciousness is actually a part of the information processing system of the universe. The quantum information processing system in the universe is able to provide our consciousness connectivity to the universe, while at the same time providing us with strict privacy and individuality of thoughts and feelings. The quantum information processing system in the universe creates the possibility of immortality. As we know, our physical bodies age, die, and then decay. On the other hand, electrons are practically indestructible. Even a nuclear blast cannot destroy electrons. So electrons seem to be able to exist almost forever. The lifespan of an electron is about 10 billion trillion of our years, according to the information contained in the book Tioba Prophecy. This implies that the lifespan of electrons is about 1 trillion times longer than the age of our universe. Electrons seem indestructible. However, the information encoded in electrons and in our soul may change. In particular, we can program our consciousness ourselves, choosing what to think and what better not to think about. Aiming for the continuation or immortality of our consciousness, we should try to make some progress in programming our consciousness in the context of the entire universe. Of course, acting or planning to act against nature in any way is not helpful. Most certainly, programming our minds with nonsense and dishonesty does not help. It is clear that causing suffering, harming others, and interfering with conscious evolution of other people does not lead to any conscious progress. Possibility of continuation of a consciousness brings a question. If a physical body is temporary and electrons containing our consciousness are indestructible, how does the development of consciousness continue? Many civilizations, cultures, and traditions in the history of mankind on Earth embraced the so-called reincarnation, a way of continuing the development of consciousness in a series of lives in different physical bodies. In practice, this means that if we cause suffering or harm someone in any way, physically, emotionally, or psychologically, in the future we will suffer in a similar way until we understand how to harmoniously coexist in the universe. In other words, what goes around comes around. There is no escape from the quantum information processing reality of the universe. Do you remember the sentence of the Gospel of Thomas that I mentioned before? There is nothing hidden that will not be revealed. It is entirely up to us for how many lifetimes we will have to suffer misery and hardship. In short, we should aim to do good and avoid doing bad or harmful things at all costs. Do you know anyone who reacts with kindness to evil? How many people do you know who react with the kindness to violence and injustice imposed on them? Let's return to the subject of the soul. Can we somehow verify the existence of our soul around our physical body? I am Thomas, and I need proof. The omnipresence of electrons around our body is actually well known. The so-called static electricity around our fingers can permanently destroy sensitive electronic devices such as semiconductors, for example, if they are not specially protected. But do the electrons surrounding our body contain and process information related to the functioning of our body and mind? Electrons can absorb and emit photons, and this electrophotonic glow or light carries information. Electrophotonics, also known as GDV or bioelectrography, is a method of generating, amplifying, and recording electrophotonic glow around parts of the human body and interpreting the information it contains. Information about the human state is contained in the shape and location of the electrophotonic glow. This is human state diagnostic chart based on the electrophotonic glow around 10 fingers of both hands. Using this chart, we can reliably determine what happens in a human body and where it happens. It turns out that the clinically verified accuracy of the electrophotonic diagnosis of human state is better than 95%. Diagnostic information in the electrophotonic glow around human body comes from our consciousness and not from the physical body. 3 observable phenomena seem to confirm this. The first phenomenon is that the electrophotonic diagnostic information in the glow around human body disappears after clinical death, even though the dead physical body contains clear material evidence of disease or injury. The second phenomenon is that the fear of disease is practically indistinguishable from the symptoms of the actual disease in the electrophotonic glow around human body. But fear is a state of consciousness, not a state of the body. The third phenomenon is that during the decision-making process, signs of activity in the electrophotonic glow around the human body appear to precede brain's electrical activity related to this process. With the help of electrophotonics, it is possible to study the phenomena after death of the physical body. Professor Korotkov, who did research and wrote a book on the subject, concluded that there is a connection between the dead physical body and the electrophotonic glow activity attributed to consciousness for up to 72 hours, 3 days, after clinical death. It is not a coincidence that Jesus came back to life within 72 hours after his crucifixion. Second observation that Professor Korotkov made is that it is possible to determine the probable cause of death from observation of the electrophotonic glow around the dead body for up to 72 hours after clinical death. In particular, by observing changes in the electrophotonic glow, it can be distinguished whether death was the result of an accident, murder, suicide, or disease. Suicide triggers the most distinctive, clearly recognizable electrophotonic activity around the dead body, as if the person only after suicide realized the enormity of the mistake and tried to desperately come back to life without really knowing how. We are now ready to reflect on the purpose of the universe. Is the global quantum information processing system in the universe aware of itself? If so, then the entire universe is conscious. The conscious creator of the quantum information processing system in the universe is well known on Earth under various names: the Holy Spirit, the Living Father, the Great Spirit, the Great Intellect, the Creator, and God. If the universe works consciously, what is its purpose of existence? Evolution of consciousness? We can now begin to draw some conclusions. The death of the physical body is not the main danger for man, because our consciousness, when sufficiently developed, can attain immortality. The real danger lies in how we live and how we program our consciousness. Now the question is, why do we live in a physical body? Since electrons that carry our consciousness are indestructible, maybe we don't need a physical body. There is a sentence in the book Tioba Prophecy. Man exists physically for the sole purpose of developing spiritually. From my point of view, life in a physical body is a test. If we really understand something, or we just fool ourselves that we do. Living in a physical body accelerates the development of consciousness. Just as children need temporary toys to develop faster, our physical bodies act as a temporary toys for our consciousness. Living in autonomous physical body forces us to deal with limitations and inspires us to make the best possible use of what we have available around us. The process of life in a physical body allows us to gain some wisdom. Let me quote another sentence from the Gospel of Thomas. Whoever has some will get more. Whoever has practically nothing, everything will be taken away from him. So, whoever has some wisdom will get more, and who does not have enough wisdom, everything will be taken away from him, even what the person thinks he has. Jesus clearly told Thomas, whom, by the way, he considered his twin brother, that a physical body becomes redundant at some stage of the evolution of human consciousness. Beware and pray that you may not be born in a physical body, but that you may be free from the bondage and bitterness of this life. Now, who is you in this statement? Isn't it clear from this statement that the conscious person, that is Thomas, is referred to as a totally different entity than his physical body? Have you noticed that most people on earth clearly distinguish me from my body? Now the question arises here. Who are we? We are conscious souls undergoing physical experiences in our temporary physical bodies. It is very important to notice that every one of us has the freedom of choice of what to do and what to think about. The freedom of choice is very important because our conscious development can only happen as a result of our free will. No one can decide for us to develop our consciousness. Our consciousness is a part of the information processing of the entire universe, but functions strictly individually. Why? Because the individuality of our consciousness is essential for its development. In particular, the freedom of thought, the ability to make conscious decisions and experience their consequences are necessary conditions for the improvement of the information processing system in our consciousness. If our consciousness did not have the autonomy of functioning individually, we would all be puppets with no influence over what is happening to us and why. But fortunately, quantum information processing system in the universe enables the highly protected, individual, and conscious functioning of every living organism. Let me illustrate what I want to say here by trying to express my wish. I wish I could give you some imagination. But this is impossible. You have to develop your imagination yourself. I wish I could give you some intelligence and wisdom. But this is impossible. You must try to think and become wise yourself. I wish I could give you the ability to understand. But it can't be done. You must learn to understand yourself. I wish I could give you some sense of humor. Unfortunately, it is also impossible. You have to develop your sense of humor yourself. I wish I could give you a sense of beauty and a sense of justice. But this also cannot be done. You can only develop them yourself. I wish I could give you the ability to express and feel love. But I can't do that either. You can only learn to express and experience feelings like love yourself. I wish you concentrated in your life on everything that cannot be given, because they are exactly the same things that no one can take away from you. Things that cannot be given, that I just mentioned, are fundamental properties of our consciousness that can only be developed as a result of our conscious individual effort. Are there any limits to evolution of our consciousness? If there was any limit in the development of our consciousness, those who reach such limits after millions of years of conscious effort would feel deeply disappointed. Is there any point to create a system of information processing in which the final result for everyone is a disappointment? We can conclude that there should be no limits to the development of our consciousness. I suspect, but I don't have any proof, that at some point of our conscious evolution we could decide to create our own universe. The only limit to evolution of our consciousness is the limit that we impose ourselves. Let's now explore the opposite direction. Is there any limit to human stupidity? Looking around and observing how some people on earth behave, we can clearly see that there are no limits to human stupidity. What direction in the evolution of your consciousness do you plan to adopt? Progress or decay? You have the freedom of choice. What do you choose? More information on topics that I tried to briefly discuss today can be found in my books, The Freedom of Choice, Consciousness and Immortality, in my translations of the Gospel of Thomas and the Book of Thomas, and in the book Tiahuba Prophecy.